Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry about the slight delay. Tech issues, as you can imagine. My name is Emma Cripwell, and I am a PR for the Pig Hotels, and I also consult for Roxhill Media. My colleague Olivia is in the black jumper, and she'll be asking the questions that come in from you all throughout the webinar. And I'm very excited to introduce Mark Palmer, property editor of the Daily Mail, and Isabelle Fraser, property editor at the Daily Telegraph. We are waiting for Helen Davies to arrive, but she is having tech issues, so we will crack on. There are 70 of you logged into this webinar, so I think we will get started during this extraordinary time. First question, Mark, how have things been since lockdown for you, with your property pages in particular?
Well, they've been pretty grim, really. And I'm getting pretty tired of the whole kind of virtual thing.
I know. Case in point.
But at the same time, what's kind of strange is that people are stuck at home, and so there's actually a lot of time for people to look at property. I notice my wife, whenever I come down to the kitchen and she's on her phone and she's sort of looking at kind of idyllic cottages somewhere and all that. So conversely, that it seems people are looking for things and having ideas about the future, but there's no actual way of kind of cementing that.
And things at work, Isabelle, how have things changed for you at work? I mean, I know it's all a bit bonkers working remotely, but what are the sort of logistical headaches of trying to produce a newspaper when you can't get to the office and no one in the Telegraph can get in?
Well, the last 2 and a bit weeks, I've only been at work for 3 weeks because I had a bout of it myself. Well, what I think was it. So I've been a bit out of action. And also that added issue is that we put the print section on hiatus at the moment. So we're not doing a property print section, and I've moved on to help out personal finance with their print section. So, I mean, it works actually surprisingly smoothly. I was kind of worried that it might be a bit of a disaster, but actually it's fine, and as long as everyone communicates. Hopefully there haven't been too many typos. That's the main worry.
Exactly. So now you don't have an actual print section for property, can the property PRs that are logging into this webinar, can they still pitch to you for online stories? And what sort of stories are you looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they should just get in touch. The thing is that, I mean, they should always come to me with ideas, but we might just have to work together to figure out what to do with them and how to make them relevant, because a lot of stuff feels very unattached to what people want to read. I've been finding that we're getting a lot more traffic than usual, but it's all things which are very instructive and practical and helpful, rather than the more aspirational stuff that we were doing previously. Right.
Interesting. And Mark, what about your pages? Are they very much news driven, or are they lifestyle driven?
It's interesting. I mean, I look after the property and interiors, but also the travel pages. And actually, the property and interiors is kind of easier in a way to do at the moment than travel, because with travel, if you sort of start talking about how wonderful somewhere is, and slightly people maybe they resent that because they can't actually go there and everything. But I think with property and interiors, it's a little bit different. But I think that, funny enough, just this morning I commissioned a piece for Friday's paper, which is trying to actually answer some of the questions about what's really going on in the world of property, and what is the future. I mean, I noticed that Halifax came up with some figures today about sort of decreasing values and everything else. Is that really kind of relevant? Is it going to be the case that once we get through this, that people are going to be, looking madly, picking up where they left off? Are people, though, in fact, going to renege on some of the offers they made? So everything is kind of up in the air. It's pretty uncertain. So we're trying to look at that and to see also what options there are for the government. I mean, I think probably the Chancellor's got quite a lot on his plate at the moment. But I think there are some things that he could do to get the property market going again. And once you get the property market going, then kind of that helps so many other sectors as well.
Right. So if I were a property PR working for one of the big estate agents, what sort of stories are you seeing at the moment being pitched into? And when we come out of lockdown, which we'll get that news probably maybe on Thursday, we don't know. What can you see? How can we as property PRs, not that I am, but my colleagues who've logged into this, how can we start to be creative and almost help the industry get back on its feet?
Well, I think that we're all scratching around for kind of creative ideas, and for example, it could be that after we get through this, people are going to be looking for kind of more remote places to live, or perhaps there's going to be people. We keep reading that people are kind of getting back in touch with nature, and so maybe that that people who've got houses to sell where they've got possibility of having your own asparagus patch or whatever. And I think it's trying to look at kind of where the market might go, or how we've changed as a country as a result of this, and how the market might follow.
Right. And how about you, Isabelle? Do you see similar sorts of pictures coming into you, or will there be a change in the tempo?
I think well, I don't know. I think what I'm looking for, I haven't actually received many pictures recently because I think people are like a bit confused as to how to go about it, and I don't blame them. But I think in the absence of any, we cover the market, we cover all the house price indices, and as you say, the Halifax stuff is in a way kind of pointless at the moment because everything's frozen. So I think in the absence of all that, I'm interested in case studies and what people are actually doing and how it's really affecting them. And we've done a few pieces about on case studies, and people are in horrifying situations, trapped in chains, being forced to complete when they don't have the cash, stuff like that, and really practical ways. I think while we're stuck in this limbo, I think that's the best way at the moment we can cover the market, and then as we come out of it, we can highlight the places that are be quite local, be very granular with the data, that kind of thing.
So for both of you, presumably getting some robust stats from those within the property PR sphere are very interesting, like watching behaviour over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Those sorts of details, they work for you, do they? Do they work for you, Mark?
Yeah, they do. I'm interested to know if people are still kind of talking to their estate agents, or I talked to somebody from Savills today, and for example, they've furloughed quite a lot of their staff. They've closed some offices down, although if you ring their offices, it does sort of go through to somebody, and I'm sure that's probably a sensible thing to do. But I'm kind of curious to know what if people are any new inquiries, or the sort of things that people are looking for. We can only just kind of guess, but I think that one thing that's emerged from the last few weeks, or from the lockdown, I'm sure it's the same in urban areas and rural areas, is I think people have sensed, feel perhaps a greater sense of community than they did before this crisis started. And I kind of I imagine that once we get through this, that I can imagine estate agents sort of telling prospective buyers that, talking about that, and talking about a sense of community in this particular place, or in this street during the crisis, this is where they did X, Y, Z, or those sort of things. So any kind of ideas like that, I think are certainly kind of very helpful at this time.
And do you get into the gritty things like the mortgage holidays that a lot of people are taking? Is that sort of thing you would cover?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And in fact, on Friday, we're doing a sort of Q&A really, but looking at various aspects of the property market.
Oh, welcome, Helen Davies.
Another person.
Hello.
Little bit late to the party, but well done for getting in.
I'm so late to the party.
It doesn't matter.
you.
It's good that you've joined the party. Sorry, Mark, I interrupted you, but Helen,
No, it's fine.
I'll just introduce you. So there are 70 people logged in, and we've now got you. And Mark's just answering a question. Then we'll put one to you. So carry on, Mark.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
What was the question? I've forgotten already.
The sort of the mortgage holidays and, and whether you'll be covering things like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's really interesting, and to explain to people how that works, and on the face of it, it sounds quite enticing, but obviously it's got to be paid at some point. And I think it's very important that the world of property should put some pressure on the government in certain ways. I mean, I think that in particular, obviously, we've all been crying out for some change in stamp duty, and I know that's always at the moment. It's one direction of travel. There's not much is coming back from the Chancellor on that. But if there was something that could be done on stamp duty, which would encourage the market to sort of speed up after we get through this, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, interesting. Helen, a question for you. I've asked these guys a bit. What sort of pitches are you receiving at the moment, and in the next 2-3 weeks, what are you crying out for particular ideas where there's a big gap from PRs, or are you being inundated with unhelpful emails from PRs, or is the community been quite helpful?
I have to say, I'm not being particularly inundated with that much, to be honest. I think we're responding our relationship is far more with the readers than the PRs, and you're there, and it feels much more conversational with what's happening. We're asking for them to send their questions in as much as possible. We're answering them. We're, like I'm sure all the other editors have seen, record digital traffic in this period, completely unsurprising. Like as everyone has said earlier, it's constructive news. So from a PR point of view, I think to just not be cloth-eared about it would be the best advice I can give. If you are going to send anything through, starting it as if lockdown has never happened before is a bit silly. But
my screen.
Sorry. I think you need to just be more. I think everyone's just becoming more attuned to a new version of reality, to a pace of change that it's evolving much quicker than usual. And when people say, do you send ideas? I say, yes, I always want ideas. It's exactly the same as pre-lockdown. There is absolutely no difference. I want good ideas. I want them to be relevant. They have to be newsworthy. They have to be exclusive. They have to be useful to the reader. That was the same 2 months ago, and it's exactly the same now. It's just that the appetite from the reader is probably more intense and in greater numbers than you would have had before.
Yeah, interesting. And on that note, Isabelle, presumably you have the same volume of questions from your readers, because they're all your readers are very engaged with their respective publications. What sort of questions are your readers asking you? Because as PRs, we'll obviously be called on to help answer those.
A lot of them are asking questions that we don't know the answers to, which are things like, they're sort of government things that the government needs to answer. So, we can try our best to find a bit of a way through it. And I mean, I've taken on more of a role doing more personal finance stuff. So I'm seeing a wider sort of sorts of questions about small business and things like that. And it's all the same. It's all trying to make sense of everything. So I can't really sort of pin one thing down, but I think people are being unsure about what exactly the freeze in the market means, because it is actually quite vague. It's, the market is frozen, but also you can still make an offer on a house if you want to, but it's, it's sort of very unclear, but no one's going to give anyone any clarity. The government's not going to say anything more, so we just have to work out what that means for people.
Yeah, I was about to say, in terms of sorry, I'm butting in
No,
terms of the PRs that I have got, then and or the insight and the expertise you want, I think I find a need to have it all the way through the chain, whereas before it might have been much more on the selling side, and we did cover solicitors and kind of conveyancing and the councils a little bit. But I think you now want to understand all of that far more.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the rental market, Mark, presumably, you know, all of the 3 titles here, you do cover the rental market. What sort of stories will you be running for the next few weeks on that? Because I know quite a few people won't be paying their rent come the end of April, so that could be an interesting moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of our readers are worried about that. I think our readers tend to be kind of over 55s and that, and so we don't get too many questions about the rental market. I think what we're getting is people are just worried about timing and what, you know, when should they do X and when should they do Y. And as someone was previously saying, that you can make an offer still on a property today, and you can exchange and all that, even, you know, despite the government's warning that that's not a very good idea. But perhaps it is a good idea. I mean, perhaps actually this is the time when you can actually negotiate, you know, a deal. You can use the uncertainty perhaps to your own advantage. And also, I think for a lot of our readers, old readers who may be looking to downsize and they hate being in limbo and just want to know, okay, well, if I exchange and if I can agree with the buyer or seller that we're not going to actually have a specified completion date, but at least I know that I've got this transaction in the bag, and we'll sort out the details, you know, a bit later. Obviously that depends on the 2 groups of solicitors kind of agreeing to that. But I think, and then you've got the question of, you know, first-time buyers. I mean, should they be thinking that this is a good time to look around and have our, you know, get your eye on something, or do you just wait and do absolutely nothing for a few months? I mean, I don't really have the answer to that, but those are the sort of questions I think people are asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, with every property comes a garden. We know that we've become a nation, those of us who have a bit of patch of garden to garden, and we've become professional gardeners. Will stories like that unfold in the next few weeks? Do you think we'll all start to really yearn for that green space in any property that's being offered by estate agents? Helen, sorry, Mark.
Sorry, no. I think if you live in London, as I do, and you have a little tiny little sort of patch of concrete out the back, and when you look at sort of friends who post Instagram pictures of them in their sort of cherry blossom gardens and lawns and paddling pools and all that, I get deeply irritated.
It's seriously annoying. My sister created a word last week called Gardenfreude, because there was someone in the I newspaper who was finding it so irritating. It's now a new word. And Helen, what do you think? Do you think there'll be some more?
Yes, I mean, we have already done a lot. We've done gardening specials. Rachel Detain wrote a very moving piece in it, which she sort of called Gardening, the Fourth Emergency Service. But we can see that it's not a new thing. You know, gardening and why gardeners were so good for your health and well-being is kind of being championed for a number of years. This lockdown just proved how significant that actually is, what difference it can make. So we are doing it, but again, it's like it has to be practical help that you're offering at the moment. So we might do virtual gardening apps, garden podcasts to listen to, the best garden books, 101 things to do on your balcony, anything and everything, trying to appeal to those that have a small balcony up to a very large garden. I'm sure there are people terribly worried about whether or not they should still employ their 3 gardeners or not, or what's happening with their lawn. We'll cover them too. But overall, I think there's much more to be learnt, and it will start to come out later, you know, about how we design our homes and towns and villages and what we need to do. You know, like high rise might not be the answer anymore.
Yeah. Right. We've got lots of questions coming in. I'm just going to hand over to Olivia, who's been scanning the questions, and we'll read some out to you now.
Yes. So are you thinking about future-looking stories, or is it too difficult to predict what will happen?
Isabelle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, future loses its kind of meaning when you, I mean, for me, the future is sort of Friday. So
Yeah.
not really. I think, you know.
So you're not planning
just
ahead. It's just very, very now.
Very now. I mean, unless there's like an interesting. I'm also very interested in stories that have nothing to do with coronavirus, that are interesting in themselves. Like, please, my God, give me something else to read about. So, you know, if it's, life will continue afterwards, obviously, hopefully. So if there's interesting stories about, I don't know, not developments necessarily, but towns being built, or I don't know, yes is the answer, but I can't really tell you exactly what. But yes, as long as they're interested.
Great. Mark, how important is expert commentary right now? Do you want experts offered to speak to you, or should we wait for people to come to you?
Now I'm always interested in hearing what what people have to say. I mean, we don't it doesn't make the paper all the time, but it's all just the mill, and it is helpful. And particularly, I'm interested in seeing what the property world is how proactive it's being in this kind of dead time, and interested in new ideas, or trying to put pressure on the government, when it comes to stamp duty, whatever it is. So so I'm keen on that. I just that what doesn't quite work for us is that as soon as anything happens, that you then get sort of 100 kind of quotes from somebody saying nothing particularly interesting about some slight kind of change of direction, and because it just doesn't sort of make the paper. But that's isn't to say that one should stop doing that. It's just that it's got to be kind of something newsworthy, otherwise it's a waste of everybody's time.
Thank you. Helen, are you looking for overseas property stories or focusing on the UK market? And I guess that applies to all of you as well.
Yeah, people keep asking about overseas. Whilst we cannot travel, then overseas stories are very kind of limited, and also apart from the fact that the reader can't necessarily go there to look at the house, we can't either, and so we're not going to write about houses we can't go and actually see in the flesh, or places we can see in the flesh. But I think we're already looking at possibly doing a piece, a roundup on what's like early indications of what's happening in other overseas housing markets. That we might do that as a one-off. If and when prices start to dip significantly in certain areas of Europe, which are British favourite spots, then it's a bit ghoulish, but there's the possibility of sort of bargain hunting type stories. But other than that, it's totally dependent on the story. And I think that, so it's something that's incredibly price sensitive and relevant to make it newsy or personal, and people are definitely responding far, far more to the personal in stories. So we are looking for those.
Great. Do you think virtual property tours are going to be on the up?
Who do you want?
Sorry, who?
Isabelle, Mark, any of you can go for that one?
Well, I think they are. They clearly are on the up, and as I said before, it's a bit of an obvious one, really. And everybody's written about virtual tours. But I do think that it does show us, in the same way that, in a scary sort of way, that the Daily Mail, they now realise that they can produce a newspaper every day without having one single person in the office, which is pretty
no one in the office, which is pretty
wow. And so I think in the future, I think that there'll be more of a call for virtual tours, and I think that perhaps that's a positive that's emerged from this, that you're going to be able to to see, online, you're going to be able to see more of the property than just a few pictures and things. So so I think that's a positive in a way.
Great. Isabelle, what property trends do you see being exacerbated by Corona?
Price falls. I don't know. I just think that this is a bit of an extraordinary time. So I do think one thing that will happen maybe is that if the recession goes on for a while, house builders may end up moving more of their homes for sale into build to rent, or not build to rent, but for rent. So I suppose like growth of the rental sector is one thing that could be a sort of outcome of it. I don't know about exacerbated, so.
I kind of feel that everything how we're living is just being felt more intensely. It's just been brought into sharp relief. But essentially, almost all the trends are exactly the same. So London is very, very different to elsewhere. The rental market is kind of potentially different. There is a north-south divide. There is a quite clear haves and have-not divides in the property market. Those at the bottom will suffer far, far more. Those who are quite wealthy will potentially do quite well out of it. They've got very low mortgage rates, a couple of homes, they're fine. But I think, so I think, and also it has shone a light on quite how antiquated and slow the process of buying and selling is. And that needs to absolutely change, because the pandemic, or the idea of a pandemic, is unlikely to go away. It can come back in November, it can come back next April. And if you did want to make a move, now you've spent far too long scrutinising the inside of your house and you've decided, I want to move, I think you'd want more assurance that you could complete that move within a particular time frame.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that it's become such a laborious process, the whole kind of buying and selling thing, and to the only advantages obviously is to the lawyers who can kind of span it out for so long. I think you're absolutely right. And
they go on holiday from May to about September every single year, so this is going to be another problem.
Yeah, and you try and push them, and exactly, and it never really works. And I think another trend, I think that's absolutely right about the difference between being in London. I feel kind of slightly strange about being in London because I've got a tiny little cottage in the borders in Scotland, which we normally rent out, sort of holiday lets and things. And before all this happened, I thought, gosh, I just want to escape and go up there. But then I realized that there's all this sort of talk about you shouldn't go to second homes and everything else. So staying here in London. And in some ways, I feel to be in London at this time, there's also it's scary and it's not very pleasant. And I live quite near the hospital, and the sirens are going 24 hours a day and everything. At the same time, I feel it's quite a privilege to be still in London, and we can look, longingly at those people in their sort of big houses and cozy lawns and all that. Actually, there's something to be said for being here and showing some sort of camaraderie with fellow Londoners. But one trend I think that might also emerge, two trends. I think one we've touched on is gardening and the whole idea about people growing their own vegetables and in future being able to fall back on that. I think also air quality has been quite a change. I mean, I've noticed it myself hugely in London that, went for the walk yesterday and actually the air for the first time in a long time was really quite nice to breathe in the middle of London. And that made me think, gosh, how wonderful it would be if it was like that sort of all the time. And I think that could be quite a sort of selling point for people is fresh air.
Yeah.
Great. Is it best to copy in others in your team when pitching? What are all of your teams like at the moment? Is it skeleton staff? Have many of the teams been furloughed, or is it all just business as usual, working from home? If we start with you, Helen.
It's business as the new usual is what's happening. I have to say, none of us have worked harder for the past 3 weeks. you know, working remotely definitely takes at least 20 to 30% more time to get the same things done. So it's all 8 of us, including Katrina, who's obviously very busy in interiors. We're all staff, so we're very in a lucky position at the moment. And yeah, do copy myself, Carol Lewis and Melissa York into all pictures, unless you're going for one particular specialist, in which case copy Carol and copy us all in if you want. We are all taking holidays as and when. I'm on holiday in my living room. I know. I clean my windows. So we will be encouraged to do that. But I mean, it's like always, we just need to know what's going on. I think that an email and a phone call won't necessarily make it into print or make it as a story, but what we're doing is just having better relationships with everybody, whether that be to do something in a week's time or in 2 months' time when we're kind of really busy. I've never been on the phone as much. It's like the old days, as I keep explaining to people. And so yeah, I copy us all in, but I think at the moment we're all lucky and healthy and happy, and actually people have been really quite motivated to act on a reader's behalf to come up with like the best kind of reaction we can for both Times and Sunday Times, and then for the Times very much more interested in news stories as well.
Brilliant. Mark, just a quick one for you. Do you think with more people having pets, landlords will become more pet friendly?
Because more people have pets.
Yeah. Apparently.
Will landlords become more pet friendly?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Gosh, I don't know. Why? Because are they? Suddenly people are rushing to get more and more pets during the pandemic. Is that what we're saying?
Apparently so.
They did it. They did at the beginning when they could.
I must say, I noticed that in London there's a kind of seems to be more and more of a kind of dog community going on, and maybe that's because people are only allowed out kind of once a day or something. But all the dogs seem to be getting on terribly well together, and their owners seem to be getting on well as well. But I don't know whether that's going to change the attitude of landlords.
Time will tell. Isabelle, can we just get back to your team at the Telegraph? I know you said you've temporarily moved, focusing more on was it personal finance?
Right. So, so on the Telegraph, our team is of 2, me and Melissa Lawford. And we, in sort of the last, I guess, like 2 years, have increasingly worked more with the personal finance team, sort of sharing stories. So Melissa will write more sort of property, sort of news, money-ish stories. So I think we've just gone a bit closer together. So she'll now write more for the money sections on Saturday and Sunday as well, for about property. So always good to get in touch with her for things about anything, landlords, renters, buyers, research, etc. But also me too. And I think I guess like send everything to me, but also send stuff to her if it's more, as well as me, if it's more newsy markets based.
Brilliant, thank you.
I have a question. Do you all see everyone doing many more things to their homes? Well, I'm sure now they're doing things, but obviously it's hard getting supplies. But when we're out the other side, do you see lots of people starting up their homes because they can't move, because it's going to be too expensive to move? Is that going to be something that just keeps running? Helen, what do you think?
It's always running. I mean, I think people, it is going to depend on how long this lockdown lasts, but I think there will be a whole load of people that seek to move. We've also got 3 years of pent-up Brexit demand where people just didn't, because they kept thinking, we'll get Brexit done and then the housing market would be brilliant and then I'll take advantage and I'll move. So I think regardless, there's obviously a huge financial issue and lots of people won't be able to do a lot of things. Mm-hmm. There are people who, if they are in the position, will do that. They will get a loft extension, they will put a garden studio in, they will make sure they've got a new freezer, they will look at creating snugs and nooks and different zones or soundproofing, or if I'm stuck here again in it's winter and I can't go outside, what do I need to do? There's also people who've already tarted their houses up because they're so bored. They've actually gone and done all the jobs they thought they keep putting off every weekend. So I know our team have got, doorknobs are sorted, the grouting is now clean, windows are now done, skirting boards are now dusted. I mean,
We've all done it.
I think it will give people, there's a lot at the moment to potentially reassess and recalibrate, as well as worry about. And so we'll just have to see. But I can imagine the recession allowing, there could be a lot of skips outside houses at some point.
Yeah. Do we have more questions, Olivia?
Yeah, I've just got one for Isabelle. If you could choose one industry survey/poll to write a story about, what would it be?
About property.
I imagine so, yes. I think
don't really.
so. I'm going to ask
Okay.
him.
I mean, I don't know. I don't really care what it's about as long as it's interesting. And I think that's my main message to PRs, is that, like, regardless of coronavirus or not, or where the research comes from, or I don't know, as long as it is interesting, not just to you as a PR and your client, but everyone else, because I think that's there's often a gap between that. So if it's something you think that Telegraph readers would be interested in for whatever reason, if it's new or unusual, it's a different angle on something. I think that's what we're all interested in, probably.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Mark, a girl called Louisa has recently taken on a data-based property client. I wondered if there was any interest in comparison to the 2008 crash and making predictions on that, or is that a bit too doom and gloom at the moment?
Well, there's no shortage of doom and gloom. Yeah, it's a very different situation from the 2008 crisis, and whether it's worse or better than then, we don't yet know. I mean, what happens if we get through this and then in September, October there's a second wave or something like that? So it's far too early to tell. I think though that dreams are still alive, and I think that people still want to make plans. People still want to kind of get on with their lives and move forward. And I think almost there's a sense, particularly perhaps amongst older people, that okay, well, look, when we get through this, we're prepared to take a risk. Perhaps we just been on, our life's been on hold for so long, and so let's do this and we'll sort of find a way around it. I mean, that's what I hope happens in a way, because I just hope that there is going to be some sort of movement. I think that the overseas property market, I think that might be harder. I think that because you read today that that airfares are going to I think that was a Times story, that airfares are going to be going up because there are going to be fewer people on aeroplanes, and if the planes are carrying fewer people, they're going to have to put the cost up to cover their costs, etc. So perhaps that will be kind of some deterrent for people buying overseas. So that could mean that there'll be a growth in the sort of second home market in the UK. I mean, I think one's got to try to not just sort of clutching at straws, but one's got to try to remain positive about this. And we keep being told that the market will bounce back at some point. Well, it'll only really bounce back if we kind of believe that it will, to a certain extent.
Yeah, but there's two types of bouncing back. There's prices, and then there's transactions, which since 2008 we've been looking at, in transactions, and we've got very obsessed with prices. Hopefully that obsession will die down slightly, and people will just have to come up and just say, look, I need to move house, and people will start going, oh, do you know what, I got that 5% which you could have hung on for before now doesn't mean as much when they realize how they could live in the next house or whatever. I just hopefully.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
do we have another question, or are we?
Just having a flick through, but I think we've covered most of them. Oh, we've got one more that's just come in. Lots of people seem to be focusing on the negatives of the virus. Are you interested in new builds with community initiatives going on? Isabelle, are you interested in that?
Well, I think not specifically that there are new builds. This kind of community building is going around, every community, new build or not. So I think if they're really interesting stories, or there's particular people you'd like to nominate to talk about, then get in touch. And it may not be my section, it may be features or whatever, but I think, yeah, if there's something interesting going on, get in touch.
Great.
Yeah, I'd say if there was something, if new builds realise they have to change their design, so anything that's gone through planning and you're saying, right, actually we need more mixed use, or it needs to be different ages, or this has to be closer to town, something that's they're changing in relation to what they've learned through the lockdown would be interesting. I'm interested in virtual planning, things that might be going through that we don't know about. Send those through. And on the community side, yeah, we launched the Good Neighbour Award in association with Next Door. That's the Sunday Times. But I think that sense of needing a mixed community is ever more important. And the care home thing today really signalled that. So I think the retirement home industry might be even harder pushed than the second home one for a bit. So I'm interested in how they are going to adapt, how agile they can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the all those old problems and how to build more homes for people and social housing and all those issues obviously is still very much sort of on the agenda. And I'm particularly interested in new homes and how we can build sort of more affordable new homes. I'm kind of very interested at the moment on the whole kind of modular build thing, the kind of prefab houses and why is it that in other countries like Germany, a huge percentage of new builds are made in a factory and up they go in no time, and we're still in the dark ages in that respect. So I think I think sort of the future of housing is still a huge issue, and we're always keen to hear about any kind of new initiatives or ideas.
Brilliant.
I've got one more question. Being the sociable beasts that we all are, journalists and PRs alike, Helen, you mentioned you were receiving lots of phone calls now. Do you like that? Do you feel that your relationships with PRs are as good as ever, and are they evolving in some way?
Yes, and they go back. I mean, some of it's just going back to sort of the old thoughts. There are not enough hours in the day to talk to as many people as I need to try and get a sense of what's going on. But there is nothing wrong with the phone call. So, and if you think it's truly important, it's something that you're talking about, that it's not just a client thing. It's exactly as Isabelle said. We want stories where it's what you and your friends, your parents, your grandkids, people are talking about, not just that someone has an agenda to push forward. And so sometimes if you have that and you're invested, then the phone's the best way.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Mark? Are you a phone man?
I'm not really. No, I'm not. But I feel rather guilty because Helen was saying that the grouting's done and the windowsills are all pristine.
Not mine.
I'm afraid that hasn't really happened at Palmer Towers. But and the other thing is, but that's partly because. As Helen was saying, it's working remotely. It's pretty intense. I mean, you kind of long for the days, at least in an office, where you could, you go for a little sort of walk to get some water at the coffee machine, and you'd be distracted. And but now, because I don't know, we've got this, we use the Slack thing, so instant messaging, and if you've got to talk to one of the designers or something, and if you miss your slot, so it's pretty intense, and staring all day at this screen, and so one should, of course, then discipline one's life and so you think, right, I'm now going to clean the windows or something. But it's more likely actually that one just opens another large bottle of wine and continues watching the final episode of The Nest.
Yeah. I was about to say the intensity of it has surprised me, and the emotional labour, to keep a team going. Not that just falls on me or anyone, but there's a lot more to it when you can't just see someone face to face.
Absolutely. Right, we seem to have lost Isabelle, but are we due to finish now, Olivia?
Yes, we are.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much, Helen. It's been really, really useful. I, as a non-property PR, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has. Sorry that we've lost Isabelle, but thank you to her too. And see you on the other side. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.